in author panel with Christopher Hitchens, author of Hitch 22, a memoir, William Gibson, author of Zero History, a novel, and Sarah Gruen, author of Ape House, a novel. Author and actor Patton Oswalt is the master of ceremonies. The program was taped last week at the Book Expo America, an annual trade show for the publishing industry. This program is an hour.
Oh, hi, folks. Thanks for coming out to the BEA luncheon. My name is Patton Oswalt. You may have seen me on basic cable. I'm not used to being in front of a literate audience. This is kind of new for me. I'll be at Cranberries in West Virginia next week, featuring. Come on out. 6 Rolling Rocks for $6. I have a book coming out next year that my publisher told me that I should talk about. Although it's a little awkward to actually. Look at Hitch getting all the photogs. Look at that, soaking up the fame. Such a rock star. I have a book coming out next year. I feel a little weird talking about it. It's still an ephemeral thing in my head, but it's basically a collection of wow, one lady is taking my picture. Oh, that's so sweet. Little you. Nice. With a disposable camera. Okay, so look at the big 35 millimeter lenses. Yeah, give me a little. Oh, don't get me under the chin though. I look all bloated and creepy. Oh, like wow, why did Admiral Akbar speak at the luncheon? That was weird. Good, 3 nerds in the crowd. Basically. I don't really know where to start. I've been such a bookworm my whole life, and this is sort of my first book that's coming out. And I'm sure you guys have been through this process and are kind of old hands at it, but it is sort of a big deal for me, and I don't really know sort of what's going to happen with it, I guess. I think the weirdest part about writing the book is, as a comedian, if I come up with an idea, I usually just go on stage and just kind of blurt it out, and I get immediate response. And in writing a book, as I write each sentence, I almost want to send it out to 300 random people to see if each sentence works, which I know is a terrible way to kind of write. So I'm sort of getting used to that process, which, again, I'm sure that these guys have been through and know all about. And also, I become a dad. Which is very strange because I want my daughter to grow up very intelligent, but now I don't know how intelligent I want her to be. And I'll just, what I'm saying is my brother-in-law babysits for 2 kids in Chicago, and they're basically the prodigies. The parents are geniuses. The dad is a physicist, and the mom is some other kind of scientist, and the kids are 2 years old, and they speak languages, and they do advanced math, and they play instruments, and they're just prodigies. And at one point, my brother-in-law, but they're still in diapers. That's what's so weird. They wear diapers, but they're reading French. So one of the kids at one point had an accident in their diapers, basically, and my brother-in-law went, "Oh, do I gotta change your diapers?" And this 2-year-old said, "Diaper, singular," which. Again, that's the confidence of a serial killer. Like if you're defecating in your pants and then correcting people on their grammar, that's just eerie on a level that I'm just not used to at this point. So, and now of course I'm on Twitter, which I just love how we've basically gone from MySpace. Which was this great thing for kids, and then all the adults piled onto MySpace, and all the kids went, "Ooh, there's these creepy old people here," and they ran over to Facebook, and then all of us jumped onto Facebook, and they went, "Ugh," and then they kind of went over to Twitter, which is just Facebook boiled down to 140 letters. That's all it is how boiled down can you possibly make it? And then I also have a YouTube channel, which I've realized now. YouTube is basically the beginning of American society being Rome burning to the ground. Because all YouTube makes us is a bunch of bored Roman emperors every day. And we basically wake up and say, what do I feel like amusing myself with this morning? Would I like to see a panda poop? Or Perhaps a redneck be hitting the scrotum. I wonder, bring me a panda pooping, please. That's all YouTube basically is just people being hurt for our pleasure while we sit in our pajamas and sip lattes. Any questions? No? We're good? Nothing to kind of ask me about? Huh? Oh, what's the book going to be about? It's basically a... Wow, thank you. It's Sex in the City, but for just kind of fat shut-ins. No. No, that would be... Wow, that was... Please tell me that was mocking applause. All right. It's called Zombie Spaceship Wasteland, and it's a kind of autobiography about my life done through kind of humorous essays. And the whole basic central idea is, and if there's any writers in the room out there in the audience, you know that especially for the nerd portion of the population, part of growing up and becoming a writer is you either write a book about zombies, a book about spaceships, or a book about wastelands. Because when you're 13, 14 years old, you don't know how the world works. So in order to write about it, you have to somehow either destroy it or leave it. So you either go, oh, there'll be a zombie apocalypse, or it's a weird futuristic wasteland, or I've just left the planet and I'm killing mutants with a ray gun because I'm frightened of girls. I don't quite know how the social networks work, so I'm going to destroy them before I write about them. So that's... Folks, the book's a lot better than the way I just described it, by the way. There's there's really awesome stuff in it, I'm telling you. God, is this the way you sell a book? Just kind of go up in front of people and, really? I wrote this book and it's awesome. You should totally check it out. All right, here's Stephen King. Right, I'm going to end on a bit that made its way into the Columbian valedictorian's speech this past weekend. Yes, thank you, Columbia graduates. When I was in college, I went to a very liberal arts college, and it was the kind of college that they were very proud about the fact that, you know, we create well-rounded students. Our science majors take English classes, and our English majors take science classes. And I was an English major, and I had to take a science class. And basically, and to this day, my knowledge of science goes no further than salt is salty. There you go. So, but they had a class in my college, and I'm not making this up. I went to the College of William and Mary, and in my junior year, they had a class called Physics for Poets. So basically, it was like, hey there, English major weenie, do you want to learn about the music of the spheres without any scary numbers? Well, put on some pantaloons and a scarf and skip on down through a field of gillyflowers to the physics department, where we'll teach you about science without using any of those frightening equations that make you scurry under your bed and shiver under the coverlet. And you could ask questions like, is the red planet Mercury like the crimson eye of Cerberus? Like, yes, whatever. Just sit down, puffy shirt. We'll just get you through this. So the guy that taught the class was the head of the physics department and was clearly doing it as a favor to the college. They just go, please just get these English majors through one science class so they can graduate. And he taught the class just soaked in resentment. Like his hatred for us, you could have drizzled it over waffles. It was so thick and rich. He just hated us. But for the final exam, I guess he just figured, I've been so mean this whole semester, I'm going to try to reach out to these wood nymphs and be a nice guy. So he gave us, the final exam were 5 word problems, and he really sprinkled some English prose over them and tried to make them user-friendly. And one of the questions was, Captain Kirk is sitting on the bridge of the USS Enterprise. If a Klingon ship is approaching at this speed and the Enterprise is going this fast, it was a distance and velocity problem in space. And the question ended with, if Captain Kirk tells Chekhov to fire the phasers and the phasers go this fast. So that's the whole problem. So I'm sitting in the back of the auditorium, and this is how my friend tells it, because he was sitting next to me, and he was like, you suddenly stood up, walked all the way down to the front of the auditorium, and you're now at the professor's desk, and you're saying something very specific and very angry and very pointed, and then you walked away, and the professor put his hands on his desk and just kind of heaved himself to his feet and just went, "Everybody, please, need your attention. Word problem number 5. I've just been informed that Sulu fires the phasers on the USS Enterprise, not Chekhov. If this made the question impossible to solve, I will change the name of the crew member. Please hand your blue books to my TA. I'm going to go home, sit in a hot bath, and open a couple of veins. Screw all of you. All of you die. Please buy my book next year." All right. Thank you guys very much. All right, I'm going to introduce each of our panelists. I almost said panelists like this is a game show. This first writer is a huge... in my world, this guy is the White Stripes and Bowie and a rocket that's made of Cheetos. That is how awesome he is to me. His new book, Hitch 22, which they sent me an advance copy of, and I've read it, and it's crack. It's so good. Folks, you know him. You love him. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Christopher Hitchens.
Just a hint of tongue there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. I was thinking when you were talking about the title problem it flashed back to me the late English comedian Alan Coren wanted to write some memoirs, and he was told by his publishers, "They don't sell, don't bother." Very discouraging wherever he went. And finally he said, "Well, what does sell?" And they said, "Books about golf, books about cats, and books about the Nazis." So he wrote a book called Golfing for Cats, which had on its cover a huge cat waving a golf club with a huge swastika tattooed on its tummy, and it was a bestseller. So take courage. I was asked to be brief, but I didn't realize that I'd have such an enormous captive audience. So just relax. Everyone, I hope, has a drink and something to read, perhaps. In fact, I see you've all got Hitch 22. Make yourselves comfortable. I have no intention of being terse. I was also asked to talk a bit about what it's like writing about life writing. And one of the things is you have to bid adieu to economy. Normally I'm trying to condense, trying to lay out an argument, make a case, see how much you can pack into a few thousand. With the fount of memory unsealed, however, you throw caution to the winds. You keep remembering more and more things. You try to get them down while you can. And you look for mnemonic devices. And of course, one of the best of these, and I have a lot of them in the book, is the limerick. I know that a lot of you think the limerick is just a delivery system for filth, don't you? Yeah, filth, that's what they want. Filth and plenty of it. The humble limerick, can be used as a delivery system for filth. There's the young engine driver named Hunt, who was given an engine to shunt, saw a runaway truck, by yelling out duck, saved the life of the fellow in front. That's not what you wanted, is it? That's not at all. No. What you wanted was something filthy and preferably anti-clerical, I would guess. Strange how contemporary that stuff is. Let's see. It's a family values gathering. I'll keep it soft. They say of the Bishop of Birmingham that he screws little boys while confirming them. They kneel on the cassock. He lifts up his hassock and pumps his episcopal sperm in him. Rough, you'll agree, but hardly needs any bad words. But the real point about the limerick is not that. I could go on in that vein, but I won't, unless there's a huge demand for it. It's how much you can condense. For example, the great Robert Conquest, who is one of the many wonderful figures whose friendship I honor in the book. He's now 94, great historian of the Russian Revolution and great poet, and great limericist, and he condensed the history of the Russian Revolution into a limerick, which goes like this. The Russian Revolution had a big influence on my life at one point too, so that's my excuse. There once was a fellow named Lenin who did 2 or 3 million men in. That's a lot to have done in, but where he did 1 in, that old bastard Stalin did 10 in. You see, it doesn't leave much out. It's 5 lines. You'll remember the speech that Jacques gives in the second act of As You Like It, the 7 ages of man. You remember all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. Each man in his time plays many parts, the form being 7 ages. Remember that? This is Robert Conquest condensing those 24 lines into the following. 7 ages. First puking and mewling, then very pissed off with your schooling, then fucks and then fights, and then judging chaps' rights, then sitting in slippers, then drooling. Shakespeare in one go. You can also do John Calvin's Doctrine of Predestination in a limerick. There once was a man who said, "Damn, it's been born in upon me I am, a creature that moves in predestinate grooves. I'm not even a bus, I'm a tram." There you have it. And, well, and then there's the Wasteland. Quite easy to do if you're Wendy Cope, who I list in my memoir as one of my favorite poets, certainly my favorite woman poet. And she has the Wasteland like this. In April, one seldom feels cheerful. Hot sun and cold dusk make me fearful. Clairvoyants depress me. Commuters distress me. Met Stetson and gave him an earful. Yeah, the Wasteland, ladies and gentlemen. So, these I try and include as mnemonic devices, but the task of telling about one's life doesn't get any easier. In fact, it gets harder once you've finished, because you keep on remembering more things, or things you wish you'd said. Since we're talking in French, it's what Diderot calls the esprit d'escalier, the line you think of on the staircase on the way down that you wish you'd uttered at the time it comes to you too late, sometimes called arrière-pensée. I was asked yesterday why I decided to slightly out myself and describe a gay episode in my Brideshead regurgitated days at Oxford University, where 2 of my conquests included delightful young men who later became members of Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet. And I was asked why I'd chosen to put that in. And I said, well, I've been in favour of screwing the Tories all my life. Why didn't I put that in the book? I torture myself about it. Jonathan Karp, my brilliant editor and publisher, and one of the founders of this feast, said to me at one point, there's quite a lot of sex, but not very much love in the book. And I was thinking in blurbs by then, and I thought immediately, lots of sex but no love, Jonathan Karp, 12. Perfect blurb. It was almost written for me. They say it's a good sign if you keep on thinking about it, and that it's boring if you've put in everything. The other thing that I found is that there's nothing quite like reading about your own death. Someone referred to me as the late Christopher Hitchens in the catalogue of the National Portrait Gallery in London recently. And I thought, I'm not late, mate. But then I thought, but there's a sentence that will one day be absolutely literally true. And as Leopold Bloom says in Ulysses, it's a good thing to read your death notice. It gives you a new outlook on life, concentrates the mind very wonderfully. I recommend it. Constant reflection on demise is a good thing. Now, I'm trespassing on the time of my fellow guests here. I'll try and end with a thought, because I'd like you all to read the book, and I'd like you to give it to your friends and tell them not to take it out of the library, but to buy their own copy, because there's much more value added if you do that. And it also hit me yesterday, and I wish I'd thought of this before, that Hitch 22 is also a telephone number. It's got exactly the right number of digits, as it were. And if you just put 1-900 in front of it, will you promise? Write this down. Just dial 1-900 Hitch 22, and we can stay in constant touch. And you can send my children to college, and I look forward to it. And it's been very nice of you to be my prisoner. Thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Now, unfortunately, Mr. Hitchens has to fly to London, which I so hope someday someone says that about me, like, he wants to stay, he's got to fly to London, because you're a spy, for God's sakes. You are literally James Bond. He is going to leave now to fly to London. How awesome is that? Now let's all watch him do it. Here he goes. There, Christopher Hitchens, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. If you haven't had a chance to read the book, the chapter where he goes over some of the word games that he and his circle of equally brilliant friends play is so filthy and so kind of reassuring to a comedian like me that, oh yeah, even really smart people try to find ways to slip filthy words into classic sentences. I won't go into it, but it's actually kind of life-affirming. And it's literally pages, they're just sheets of filth, and when you're done reading them, you'll go, oh, hey, life's really great. All right, I like it. Now, our next writer, I got sent your book last week, and I've been moving, and I haven't had a chance to read all of it, but I started reading it on the plane yesterday, and I read it the entire flight. I could not stop reading it. I've read the first, I think, 10 chapters at this point. And that's really saying a lot, because the in-flight movie was The Tooth Fairy starring The Rock, and I did not watch it. Instead, I read her book instead of watching Tooth Fairy a 5th time. So that really, the book is called Ape House. I'm going to let you describe it, but we were talking about it backstage. The beginning is terrific. Maybe it stinks later on. I don't know, but the beginning is awesome. It is really amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, also the author of Water for Elephants, Sarah Gruen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hi. Whoops. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Is the microphone right in front of my face? No? Okay. Well, it's been 3 years since I was last at BAEA, and it's hard for me to believe because the time has just flown. And I actually, as many of you know, intended to be here last year, but sometimes books take a little longer to write than you intend. Before I get into details on the new book, I want to thank everyone in this room again for everything that you did for Water for Elephants. It meant the world to me. It made the book, and as a direct result of that, the film started. They started filming the movie a week ago today, and so thank you. And it's got a dream cast of Christoph Waltz and Reese Witherspoon and Robert Pattinson, and additionally a lovely elephant named Ty. And speaking of lovely animals, it was just before my Water for Elephants tour that my mother sent me an email about the Great Ape Trust in Des Moines, Iowa, and the work they were doing there with language cognition and acquisition among apes. And there were 2 reasons that I was immediately fascinated by this. And the first is that although I've loved animals my whole life, and particularly great apes, I'd never heard of bonobos. And the second is that they're doing really, really amazing work with language acquisition, and I had been following the story of Coco the gorilla since 1980, which, I've just dated myself, but it's been a long time that I've been interested in this. But the bonobos, I spent a day looking at the website of the Great Ape Trust and researching bonobos a bit, and they're the most recently discovered species of great ape. Only 1929 did they get named as their own species. They were considered a type of chimpanzee before, but they have a completely different culture, and it's a really kind of crazy culture. They're matriarchal, they're egalitarian, they're peaceful, and they're extremely amorous. The average bonobo initiates sexual contact of some sort every hour and a half. It's like a handshake. They reaffirm friendship. When they get excited about food arriving, they have an orgy before eating. They really do. So I decided right then and there that I had to do the next book on these creatures, and I really wanted to go and meet them as part of that. So apparently a lot of people want to go meet the apes at the Great Ape Trust, and the trust weeds them out by giving you tons of homework to do and making you prove that you've done it. And what part of there was a stack of books and linguistic textbooks and things, and I also went to York University for a crash course on linguistics. And it wasn't ever anything that interested me before, but when I came out of York and walked to the bus stop, what I really wanted to do was walk to the enrollment office, because I was just already so caught up in the work that was being done and listening to the vocalizations of the bonobos and them actually picking, words. But I digress a little bit, because that's the bonobo language. The thing that's important for my book is that the bonobos have human language. They understand spoken English completely, and they respond using a lexigram board, it's a series of symbols that represent words. And on their computers, they press the buttons, and a synthesized human voice says the word. And they speak in complete sentences, and they use tenses, and they're grammatically correct. It's amazing. So I did my homework, and I groveled until I got invited to the trust. But I knew that getting to the trust did not mean that I was going to get to meet the apes, because the apes are in complete control there. And so I really tried to stack my odds, like the guy in my book. I did research on each of the apes' favorite toys and foods, and I bought them each backpacks and stuffed them with bouncy balls, Mr. Potato Heads, M&Ms, and had them and sent an email to the scientists saying, oh, please tell them I'm bringing surprises. And so after my orientation, and they were testing me on the books, and I'm like, yeah, I did the homework, can I meet the apes? And so they went back and asked the apes and came back and said, well, yes, not only are they letting you in, they're insisting you come in. So M&Ms go a long way with apes and children. But so Kanzi is the most famous of the bonobos at the Great Ape Trust, and he's a show-off. He's a rock star, and he knows it. So he came out, and he was talking on his keyboard and playing music. He's recorded with very famous. He's recorded with Peter Gabriel and Paul McCartney and various other musicians. And then I met Pam Benicia, who's very quiet, and although she's more linguistically competent than her brother, she doesn't talk to just anybody. And I didn't know how to break the ice. I knew that Pam Benicia liked dogs but not cats, and I knew that she had 2 sons. So I brought a picture of my dogs and a picture of my sons. And so I showed her a picture of my dogs, and there was nothing. When she wants to say no, there's no response. And then I held up a picture of my kids from when they were much younger, and they were all in a bubble bath together, and she immediately punched babies washing bubbles in her computer. And that was the first moment of two-way conversation that I'd had with an ape. It was just really mind-boggling. What I didn't know at the time is that being a mother gets you instant status in bonobo culture, because the infants are the highest on the social hierarchy. But so I spent the day there, and they sort of dragged me out when the scientists wanted to go home. And apparently the next day, Pam Benicia said, "Where's Sarah? Build her nest. When's she coming back?" And so I wanted to. So I sent them a Fruit of the Month club. I wanted them to remember me. So this particular family of apes is what the apes in my book are based on, and I'm trying to sum it up quickly, because authors are notoriously bad at summing up their own work. But I guess I could say it's a family of language-competent apes who are torn from their home under mysterious circumstances, and then resurface several months later under equally mysterious circumstances in a reality TV show situation. Recently, I had a chance to go back and visit, and it was a very different visit. Because of the Fruit of the Month Club, they actually remembered me, and so I had many, many more conversations with them, and they were, not shy at all. And in fact, when I got there, they said, "Well, if you're really lucky, you can go for a walk in the forest with Pam Benicia." And I just thought that, wow. But then by the next morning, Pam Benicia had changed her mind, and we were to have a tea party in the forest. And so and so the other apes heard this, and they got jealous, and they said, well, if she's going to have a tea party with Sarah, then later on she has to have a tea party with us in the green tunnel. And there was all this, you could hear all this yipping and squeaking and peeping going on through the building as they were communicating this to the scientists and discussing amongst themselves where this was all going to happen. Meanwhile, Pam Benicia heard that I was having my makeup done and decided she had, and they gave her makeup, and she realized that somebody else was doing mine, so she wanted someone else to do hers. And so at one point, she ended up with very artistically self-applied purple lipstick and powdered cheeks. And her makeup job on Dr. Sue was not as wonderful. She removed it right away because it was in red, and we thought that it might give the wrong idea in photographs. Sort of a slasher film thing. But so we went out. It took a long time to get to the forest, and I realized later, I found out what had happened is that the people had set up the tea party, and Pam Benicia got upset and made them take it down because she wanted to set it up. And she has her own kitchen, and she has a gas range. And so she made the tea. She chose Earl Grey for me and blackberry for herself. And she spread out the blankets, and she knew I was coming, so she'd been saving cookies for a week. And she put out the cookies on the plates, and we were using fine bone china, and she poured the tea, and then she asked me very politely if I wanted to milk. And I said, sure, I'll have milk, and I put some milk in it. And this is where it got sort of very bicultural, bi-species. So then she asked for the milk back and went glug, and just slammed it, and it was gone. And this was a Tuesday, and the bonobos have been declared overweight, so they have diets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Pam Benicia then told me I should try the candied ginger and dip it in my tea, and so I did. And then she told me the other cookie I should eat, and so I did. And then she asked me politely for my cookies and just tipped the plate back and ate all the cookies. And then she thought about that for a while, and I guess she thought that wasn't fair. So she went off into the forest, and she brought me a branch and gave it to me sort of ceremoniously, and I guess it's called browse. I watched one of the scientists eat a leaf, hoped that she hadn't faked it, because to me I was taking her word for it that it wasn't poisonous, and so I sat and politely ate my browse, which would have been much improved with some olive oil. But then another amazing, sort of linguistically important thing was the way that Pam Benicia segued this. She looked at me and she said, using her board, Sarah, did you eat eggs today? And her favorite food is hard-boiled eggs. And I said, no, I didn't, but I did yesterday. And she said, the bunny came last week and hid eggs in the forest. Then she looked sort of pensively up and said, I wish the bunny would come back. And in the background, I see guys on walkie-talkies, and 5 minutes later, the Easter bunny comes traipsing out of the trust with a basket of hard-boiled eggs. And so the bunny showed us what was in the basket, and Pam Benicia was visibly excited because hard-boiled eggs are her favorite food. And so then Sue, the head scientist, asked Pam Benicia. Pam Benicia kept trying to get up and go and look for the eggs. And Sue said no, and then she said, do you think Sarah would be good if we sent her to get an egg? And Pam Benicia thought about it. And I was thinking, oh no, I'm being set up for failure here. But she said yes. And then Sue said, so you think if she finds an egg, she'll give it to you and not eat it herself? And Pam Benicia said yes. So Sarah can go get an egg? Yes. So off I went into the forest to get an egg. And I came back, and she ate it very happily. And at one point, she noticed that I had a bruise on my leg. And she got very concerned, and she was asking me how I got hurt. And I have a 107-pound lapdog, which is how I end up with bruised legs. But so I explained to her that I was okay and everything. But she really, really wanted to groom me, and she was very concerned about this. And then I spent some more time with the other apes, but we never got around to the tea party. And the apes were upset about this. And so I was at an off-site interview the day before I was supposed to leave, and 15 minutes to quarter to 5, we got a phone call from the trust saying that one of the apes was refusing to eat until I came back. And she was holding to her word, so they said, well, what time is your flight tomorrow? And so I got up early, and I really don't do mornings, but for the bonobos, I do mornings. And I got up early and I went back to the trust. I stopped at Starbucks. I got them all a Starbucks. And I brought them each a coffee and an apple. And I went through and talked to each ape separately and explained to them that I had to go home to my own nest and my own family, but I would come back and visit soon. And the very last thing I did was have breakfast with Pam Benicia. And it was just the two of us. And we were lying on blankets, eating our apples, completely silently. And it was in this moment of silence where there was no need for words that I really realized just how very similar we are. And that's what I hope will come out of this book. That's it. Thank you. Buy my book.
It really is an amazing book. And especially, I wanted to mention, when you showed up with the backpack full of the stuff that you knew they would like so that they would let you in. I just remember when I was at the Sundance Film Festival a few years ago, and I walked into some gifting suite, and they were frantically trying to get like the right kinds of shoes and vodka and fragrances out on the tables so that Paris Hilton would show up. Like, they had to make sure to get her favorite things, and I realized, oh, it's just a backpack for a happy ape. That's all it really is. They just get her M&Ms and her bouncy ball, and maybe she'll show up, and we'll get a picture. Isn't that nice? And she worked with a nice little keypad too. She was like, vodka, give me. It was really touching. It was really touching. But then they tranked her, and it got really ugly. So, our last writer of the day, I really need no introduction. This guy coined the term cyberspace right out of the gate, and then he kept. A lot of people wouldn't be able to follow that, and he just kept expanding and deepening this amazing dark universe that he kind of lives in. He people also don't know he coined the term bootylicious and Westonality, and he does not get credit for those, and I think that's wrong. I think that's very wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason your kids are looking at a BlackBerry and texting and not talking to you, Mr. William Gibson. William Gibson, ladies and gentlemen, here he comes.
Say it's midway through the final year of the first decade of the 21st century, and say that last week 2 things happened. Scientists in China announced successful quantum teleportation over a distance of about 10 miles, while other scientists in Maryland announced the creation of an artificial self-replicating genome. Now, in this particular version of the 21st century, which happens to be the one we're all in today, neither of these things attracted as much attention as the final episode of Lost. Now, with quantum teleportation, there's no actual matter transferred, but information is conveyed across distance without resorting to a signal in any traditional sense. So it's not really teleportation, but still, it's the word teleportation used seriously in a headline. And so I'm reading this and saying, no kidding, teleportation. But I only really felt a slight amazement. And that synthetic genome in Maryland, which is arguably artificial life, that felt less amazing. It's the sort of thing one feels might already have been achieved somehow, or was that in a movie? But it's artificial life in Maryland. But those artificial life scientists also inserted a line of James Joyce's prose into their genome. And that triggers, the sense of the surreal for me. Even though they did it for a really practical reason, they did it to incorporate a yardstick, a measure for the ongoing rate of random mutation. So, right this minute, quite literally, a short length of James Joyce's prose is being very slowly pummeled into incoherence by cosmic rays. But when I found myself confronted with these two pieces of more or less simultaneous news, my imagination, which grew up on countless popular images of exactly this sort of thing, could only produce a tabloid headline: "Synthetic bacteria in quantum free space teleportation shocker." And when I was a boy, Alvin Toffler warned us about future shock. So is this future fatigue? And for the past decade or so, the only critics of science fiction I pay any attention to, all three of them, have been slyly declaring that the future is over. Now, I wouldn't blame anyone on first hearing that for assuming that it's akin to premature declarations that history itself is over. But really, I think they're talking about the capital F future, which in my lifetime has been a cult, if not a religion. People my age are products of the culture of the capital F future. The younger you are today, the less you're a product of that. If you're 15 or so, in 2010, you inhabit a sort of endless digital now, a state of atemporality enabled by our increasingly efficient communal prosthetic memory. But you probably don't know it because, as anthropologists tell us, we have a very hard time comprehending our own culture. The future, the argument goes, capital F, be it crystalline city on the hill or radioactive post-nuclear wasteland, is gone. Up ahead of us now, there is merely more stuff, events, some tending to the crystalline, some to the wastelandy, stuff. The mixed bag of the ongoing quotidian. Now, please don't mistake this for one of those after us, the deluge moments on my part. I've always found those appalling, and most particularly when uttered by aging futurists who of all people should know better. This newfound state of no future is, in my opinion, a very good thing. It indicates a new kind of cultural maturity, an understanding that every future is someone else's past, every present someone else's future. Upon arriving in the capitalized future, we discover it invariably to be the lowercase now. The best science fiction has always known that, but it was a sort of cultural secret. When I began to write fiction at the very end of the 70s, I was fortunate to have learned as an undergraduate that imaginary futures are always, regardless of what their authors might have believed, about the day in which they're written. Orwell knew it, writing 1984 and 1948. I knew it writing my own first novel, which was published in 1984. Neuromancer, that novel, though it's careful never to admit it, is set in the 2030s when there's something like the internet called cyberspace. and a complete absence of cell phones, which I'm sure young readers assume must be a key plot point. More accurately, there's something like cyberspace, but it's called cyberspace. Though I know that's confusing. I followed Neuromancer with 2 more novels set in that particular future, but by then I was growing frustrated with the capitalized future. To me, those books were actually about using the toolkit of science fiction to discover what I could about the 1980s. So I wrote a novel called Virtual Light, which was set in 2006, which was then the very near future, and followed it up with 2 more novels, each set a few imaginary years later, in what was really my take on the 1990s. But it didn't seem to make any difference in how I was generally read. Lots of people assumed I was still writing about the capitalized future. I began to tell interviewers, somewhat testily, that I believed I could write a novel set in the present, our present, then, which would have exactly the affect of my supposed imaginary futures. Hadn't J.G. Ballard declared Earth to be the alien planet? Wasn't the future now? So I did. In 2001, I wrote a book called Pattern Recognition, my 7th novel. Given the events of 2001, I quickly found the material of the actual 21st century to be richer, stranger, more multiplex than any imaginary future, but still eminently susceptible, it seemed to me, to being unpacked with the toolkit of science fiction, complete with a workaday level of cognitive dissonance we now take utterly for granted. Zero History, my 9th novel, will be published this September, rounding out that 3rd set of 3 books. It's set in London and Paris last year in the wake of our global financial crisis. I wish I could tell you what it's about, but I haven't yet discovered my best likely story about that. That will come with reviews, audience, and bookseller feedback. And booksellers are especially helpful in that way. Along with however many interviews, these things will serve as a sort of oracle suggesting to me what it is I've been doing for the past couple of years. If Pattern Recognition was about the immediate psychic aftermath of 9/11 and Spook Country about the deep end of the Bush administration and the invasion of Iraq, I could say that Zero History is about the global financial crisis as some sort of nodal event. But that must be true of any 2010 novel with ambitions on the 2010 zeitgeist. But all 3 of these novels are also about that dawning recognition that the future, be it capital T tomorrow or just tomorrow Friday, just means more stuff, however peculiar and unexpected. A new quotidian, somebody's future, somebody else's past. But simply in terms of ingredients, it's about recent trends in the evolution of the psychology of luxury goods, crooked former special forces officers, corrupt military contractors, the wonderfully bizarre symbiotic relationship between designers of high-end snowboarding gear and manufacturers of military clothing, and the increasingly virtual nature of the global market. And I called it Zero History because one of the characters has had a decade go missing, 10 years in which he paid no taxes and had no credit cards. He meets a U.S. federal agent who tells him that that combination indicates to her that he hasn't been up to much good the past 10 years. But that quotidian now finds him, events find him, and he starts to acquire a history, and one assumes a credit rating and the need to pay taxes. And it's also the first book I've written in which anyone gets engaged to be married. Now, a book exists at the intersection of the author's subconscious and the reader's response. An author's career exists in the same way. A writer worries away at a jumble of thoughts, building them into a device that communicates, but the writer doesn't know what's been communicated until it's finally possible to see it communicated. And after 30 years, a writer looks back and sees a career of a certain shape, utterly unanticipated. More stuff. And it's a mysterious business, the writing of fiction, and I thank you all for making it possible.
That was William Gibson, ladies and gentlemen. Or was it? I have a copy of Zero History. I have not read it yet. I cannot wait to read it. I'm going to the Sasquatch Music Festival this weekend in Gorge, Washington. I'm going to walk around with an advanced copy of William Gibson's latest book. That always brings out the good mushrooms. So I'm very, very excited. Guys, thank you so much for coming to this luncheon. I'm very excited to be a soon-to-be published author. I'm sorry that I'm so giddy and just not glib about it. It's